What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So over the weekend, a big rumor really started to gain a lot of traction online as several different sources started to back this rumor, that having to do with a new Final Fantasy game that could be announced here in the coming weeks. It would be exclusive to Sony, but it would be a completely new direction for the Final Fantasy franchise, and we're going to talk about all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about that Zelda Loftwing Amiibo that got a lot of people talking over the past week. Well, it turns out those pre-orders went up, promptly sold out, and wouldn't you know it, they started popping up on eBay for twice the price. And we're also going to be talking about Netflix, as it looks like they're getting a bit more serious about expanding into the video game space. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with GameStop and a sale that they're running throughout the week. And I'm pointing this one out specifically because first-party Nintendo games are on sale, and I know that's not a typical thing to see. And keep in mind, these will also be physical games that you can buy, not necessarily just digital copies on different storefronts like on the eShop. But we can head over here. Wario64 posted up the circular ad with some of the scans, and we can see at the top here the Memorial Day sale going from May 23rd to May 31st. So it's going on now to the end of the week, and right next to that, it's like their first thing they list. We see 5 different games from Nintendo that will have $20 taken off the top down to $39.99, that being Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. Then we have Yoshi's Crafted World, Splatoon 2, Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 3, and then Zelda Breath of the Wild. There are also several other games being marked down as well across the board for all different platforms. If you go over to the Switch, for example, you can grab XCOM 2, which is a really good game, at $14.99. The BioShock Collection at $19.99. And if you take a look also on the PlayStation 4, the PS5, the Xbox Series, all of this, you can find games like Persona 5S. That's marked down to $40, which is pretty good. And then Watch Dogs has its typical $30 price tag thrown up there. Overall, a pretty good sale, though. Certainly one to just take a look at and see if there's any extra games you wanted to add to your backlog so you could play them next year. Also, do you remember 1080 snowboarding, whether it was on the Nintendo 64 or on the GameCube? That was back when snowboarding games were actually pretty popular. They would come out actually very frequently on all the different platforms. Well, since then, it's been a little quieter on the snowboarding front. We had SSX that released, I remember, on the PS3, and recently Steep, but nothing too big since then. Well, it does look like the original creator of the 1080 series is interested maybe in bringing it back if Nintendo would like to. We can see this over by Nintendo Life. This was during a Reddit AMA where Giles said, if Nintendo wanted to make a Switch 1080, I would say, sure, I'll do it. I mean, why wouldn't you? Obviously, that'd be really cool to work again with Nintendo on a series that you worked heavily on back during the 64 and the GameCube days. In a separate question, Giles has asked if Switch and PlayStation 5 owners could expect one of his snowboarding games to show up on these platforms one day, that being like Carve Snowboarding. That's going to Oculus VR. The reply there was, we have both dev kits, so yes, it's very likely. And I mean, I guess after Carve Snowboarding, that could maybe be ported, although if it's designed for VR first, I'm not really sure how easy it is necessarily to port it over, because it could have a lot of functionality tied to the VR headset or the controls that are specific to it. But let's say it wants to go off and make an entire snowboarding game after this one. That would be cool, because like we had SSX Tricky. That was really, really cool when that released. I remember everyone talked about that game. The soundtrack was awesome. The gameplay was good. The multiplayer was fun. And then we also got things like 1080 and Amped Snowboarding. And I think at the time, going from the PS1 to the PS2, Xbox, GameCube, the snowboarding genre actually showed off the visuals really, really well. I mean, snow was actually powdered then, whereas before it was just like a texture on the ground. So it was also a really cool visual showcase back then. Now, though, we get like Steep. So yeah, we could use some other snowboarding games. Oh, and we had that Crysis Remastered that came out. It was kind of rocky on initial release, but since they've been able to patch it and work on it, it has become a lot better now, and some of the visual effects they're doing with it are really, really cool. So obviously the next step would be Crysis 2 Remastered, because you can see here on Twitter, that appears to be what they are kind of teasing here, and they've been teasing something in the works here for a bit now on Twitter, and hey, we're coming up on E3, so why not? You can kind of talk about a Crysis 2 Remaster there, and a lot of people are hoping, okay, if Crysis 2 Remaster is happening, does that mean we are working up towards Crysis 4? Because Crysis 2 still looks pretty good. I mean, obviously they can do all kinds of cool effects like ray tracing and some other things thrown in there that we've seen now kind of through advances in technology and these different engines, but like, Still, I do think a lot of people are hoping that Crysis 4 could eventually happen, but maybe doing these remasters is the way for them to continue raising capital and kind of work towards that next big Crysis game. We'll see. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this rumored Final Fantasy game. The rumor right now says that it's going to be announced at E3, although that could be, hey, we're coming up on a big event when games like this could be announced, and it seems like it's ready to go, at least to be shown off. So there could also be some guesswork thrown in. They're just kind of putting that out there. Hey, could be at Summer Games Fest for all we know, right? But this one is pretty interesting because it would be a new direction for the Final Fantasy franchise. Might even be welcomed by a lot of people because it sounds like an interesting project. Now, we can head over here, this on Twitter from Souls, where you can see they posted a kind of an image here. Final Fantasy Origins, Square Enix, PS5, Team Ninja. Okay, that's interesting. So the rumor currently states that Team Ninja is collaborating with Square and Sony to create a Final Fantasy Souls-like game, or Souls-inspired game, specifically for the PlayStation 5. Now, nothing was mentioned about PC. Sony's been okay with PC releases at time, but at this point, it does appear like we're looking at something that would be exclusive to the PlayStation 5, timed or not. You know, we'll see all of that when and if it gets announced here, but I will tell you this, after the Spawncast, I'm a lot more confident that this is a thing that we could be seeing coming up here pretty soon. And to go a little further here, we can see over at WCCF Tech, Navtra, who originally talked about the PlayStation 5 exclusive Final Fantasy game to be announced next month, confirmed that the upcoming game is indeed inspired by the Souls series, but is not exactly a Souls-like, saying it's tricky, it's certainly Souls-inspired, but it's not exactly what you'd imagine when you hear Souls-like Final Fantasy. So we've seen Team Ninja, of course, do like Nioh 2, and all of that. But the way that they're describing this, it's kind of similar to what we saw with Jedi Fallen Order, where that does have some Souls-like elements to it, but it doesn't full-on lean into, hey, you're going to die to a boss like 30 times, and then eventually you'll get past that hurdle and then on to the next one. No, we did have Star Wars Fallen Order be a little easier, I would say, overall. And obviously they were trying to tell a story in the Star Wars universe that they wanted people to see all the way through, not necessarily rage quit out halfway through and then come back months later to finish it up. So I feel like they're looking at this as really a game that they would work to tell a big-time story in the Final Fantasy universe while having kind of these touches of the Souls-like experience thrown in. And I really like the idea of this because this should feel different enough from the overall Final Fantasy games that we are accustomed to. Obviously, turn-based RPGs are now kind of more action RPGs from what we've seen with Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy 15, and I'm sure soon to be Final Fantasy 16. But having something much more action-oriented like this would kind of have it broken off into its own series, one that maybe they can continue building on if this is successful, and of course, if it really is something that we're going to see here pretty soon. I will tell you this, apparently it's rumored that a demo will also be coming out, which tells me that some stuff probably leaked behind the scenes, and at this point, they're just waiting for it to be announced. Could be marketing or any of this, and they want to tell us, hey, a demo is also showing up here in the next month or so, which, again, makes sense for Team Ninja to do because they did this with Nioh and Nioh 2, where they did those builds to then get feedback from the player base on how they can adjust different moves in the game or difficulty. And then the Sony part shouldn't surprise anyone. We've seen it with Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is still not on the Xbox or on the PC, and a lot of it has to do with Sony basically putting up money for that not to happen, of course. And Sony's talked about how they are going to make deals with third parties, which we have seen actually kind of accelerate here. So not surprising to see any of that. It's something I'm really looking forward to. So I do hope we see it at E3 because a Souls-like Final Fantasy game by Team Ninja is certainly something that'll keep my interest. Next up, let's talk about a story that probably won't surprise anyone based on past history of Amiibos and all kinds of collectible crazes going on right now. We've seen that video of people rushing the Walmart for Pokemon cards, so hearing that the Loftwing Amiibo is already sold out at most retailers through pre-orders and are being resold online for twice its value is kind of expected at this point from what we've been seeing, and we can see that over here on eBay. We'll just scroll through several of the listings. Remember, this is a $25 Amiibo, one that was already a bit more expensive than people were used to with Amiibos, but I will say there is more to this overall Amiibo figure than others, so that part's I'm less concerned about. But now we're seeing things like the Zelda Skyward Sword Loftwing Amiibo be $55, $60, $65. Of course, you are seeing things like sold out in big bold text and pictures of the pre-order receipt. That's right, these are just the pre-orders. So think about that for just a second. Obviously, this isn't coming out until the game comes out in July, and you're seeing several of these sell. I mean, one of the listings said it sold 42 of them already, and these pre-orders went up pretty recently. So that tells me that we're, of course, going to continue probably going up in price as we head towards its initial release. And then after that, we have to hope Nintendo creates more of these things. Now, I know there's a whole thing right now saying, hey, get those little NFC tags, and people can do that if they want, but there's also the sense of people who just want the Amiibo outright. I know there's a whole feature behind it, but I've talked to a lot of people. I would say 80% of people don't open these Amiibos up. They just hold on to them because they like them, they like to collect them, they like to put them up on their shelf, and yeah, probably retain value like we see that seems to go up here easily before the thing even comes out. It's just that whole functionality being locked behind the Amiibo when it's going to be very difficult to get, which has now become more expensive than the game now. The game was already considered expensive at $60. The Amiibo is like $70 now, but I guess that's just the price of Zelda in 2021 during the anniversary year. You have the cool looking Joy-Con controllers, you have the game, and then the Amiibo, and comes out to like, what, $200. So the Zelda anniversary is off and running. Next up, let's talk about Netflix, as it looks like they are looking to expand more into the video game space. We can head over here to VGC, where they say Netflix is reportedly planning to expand into video games. Streaming giant is said to be considering an Apple arcade-style game service. This is all according to a new report by The Information, which claims that the streaming giant has begun recruiting for an executive to lead future video game initiatives, which could include a games bundle similar to Apple's service. This was a statement issued to GameSpot from Netflix saying, "Our members value the variety and quality of our content. It's why we've continually expanded our offering from series to documentaries, film, local language originals, and reality TV. Members also enjoy engaging more directly with stories they love through interactive shows like Bandersnatch and UV Wild. So we're excited to do more with interactive entertainment." And the question now is, how far would Netflix really want to go with this thing? Because if it's more of these interactive shows, I guess, these choose your own adventure style things, that isn't going to be viewed as big of an entry into gaming as people would be thinking immediately when they read a headline that says they're working to expand into video games. We start thinking, oh, they might put out their own system. They might do their own platform like Stadia, for example, or Luna through Amazon if they want to do a streaming service. But if it's more like, hey, you can add on to your overall subscription that you already pay for, and now you have access to all these choose your own adventure style things, that's not as big of a deal, I would say. But there is the possibility that Netflix realizes that there is a lot of engagement when it comes to video games, and seeing Amazon with Luna, Apple with their Apple Arcade stuff, Stadia, I'm sure Netflix has explored the idea of doing game streaming, so you don't have to leave your Netflix app to go to another one where you're playing games, because Netflix just wants to keep you on their platform, obviously, like any of these streaming services. So if they're able to do that and then continue to bring more and more gaming-related content and media to their platform, like Castlevania, which dropped, and people absolutely loved this last season. And of course, we saw The Witcher show up there, that a lot of people really looked at as a video game series, even though it was based on other media before that. It's still a way for Netflix to bounce back and forth with different series that they introduce that then push you over to maybe playing the game on their platform, or vice versa. So I'm sure Netflix is very interested in the idea, but I don't believe you're going to see them release their own system, their own controller, really, none of that. In fact, you might just see them partner up with Microsoft, for example, and they could even use xCloud services and the Xbox controller where it's all built into the TV. There's a lot of possibilities here. It's more something I would keep an eye on rather than something I would expect to explode into Netflix being another console creator. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller, but on the PC, because for a little while now, there's been support through Steam where it'll recognize it. You use your PS5 DualSense controller, no problem there, but we haven't seen a lot of games take advantage of the advanced haptic feedback or the adaptive triggers, and probably because a lot of the developers who are creating PC games figure most aren't going to use the DualSense controller. They'll use like just mouse and keyboard, right? But it does look like maybe some games are starting to at least apply patches to the games to add functionality for, say, adaptive triggers. We can see this video here. This was posted up by Donnie. This was apparently sourced from Reddit, saying after a patch today, Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition became the first PC game to support haptic feedback and adaptive triggers officially. And you can kind of see in the video here, we have those adaptive triggers kind of having that kickback function that we've seen in like Call of Duty, for example, on the DualSense controller. And this is really cool to see, but like I said, I don't know how many developers for PC are just going to say, well, we have to get DualSense functionality into our games at launch. I feel like maybe fans will do different patches and updates as we go along through community posts and community mods. And I would like to see this become something that's more normalized, because I think the DualSense controller is really cool with some of the things that it can do with those adaptive triggers and the haptic feedback that's used. But we basically just need more and more developers to create for it so we can get more and more really cool ideas. But this could be the first step as we go along here and maybe see more updates to PC titles. Let me know a couple of games on PC maybe that you're playing that you'd like to see official support being added for that DualSense controller. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, Netflix is reportedly planning to expand into video games. Is this a good idea? 23% of you said yes, Netflix can integrate gaming with their current platform, and 77% of you said no, Netflix would end up like another Stadia. Well, I guess the one good thing here with Netflix is they already have a very large built-in subscriber base. So it really come down to how they approach this with their branding and those current subscribers. Do they just add a gaming section just outright and they say, try it out and see what you think, and maybe they can get a lot of people interested, and then they hit you with that price increase that Netflix likes to do, but they attach it just to the gaming side because right away they'll have a bunch of monthly active users that they can show off on paper and it would look like an immediate success. But would people continue to sign on? That's going to come down to how aggressive Netflix is with a gaming section on their service. Is it just an interactive movie kind of thing, or are they getting to the point where it's like Stadia or Luna where you can go in and just stream games with an attached controller? And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Anzo saying, we're getting old. I remember when I mentioned some PS2 and PS3 games to my students who I knew played games often, and they had no idea what I was talking about. It hurts. Yeah, the one thing that really reminds me of how old some of us are getting is when an anniversary comes up for a system that doesn't feel old to me, but then I'll see it online and it's like, whoa, the 360 is really gonna be 16 years old at the end of this year? It does not feel like it's 16 years old. Or if you have like a younger nephew, for example, and you see their reaction to a CRT TV or like a composite cable, like yellow, red, and white, and they're like, what is this? I just know HDMI. It's like, whoa. We're old. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's the Loftwing Amiibo already being resold online for more than double its price now, more expensive than the game itself that's coming out next to? And then also, what about this rumored Final Fantasy Souls-like game from Team Ninja exclusive to Sony and the PlayStation 5? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.